As of yesterday, June 15th, 2011, the latest development in the Casey Anthony case is that the forensic expert from the FBI was called to the stand by the defense. It's just an unusual move. Typically, those types of experts are called to the stand by the state attorney's office, the prosecution. The interesting fact in this case, the reason that expert was called by the defense is that, in fact, that expert said that the duct tape, which seems to be the mechanism of death, if you will, that the prosecution has put forward, was contaminated by the original collection of the evidence. There was no DNA found on that particular piece of evidence. There was no blood found on that particular piece of evidence. Well, strike that. There was some DNA. There wasn't any DNA from Casey Anthony. The DNA that was found was from the FBI person that collected the evidence. What does that mean for the case? Well, the prosecution has put forth a forensic case that really is no forensics at all. They have collected air from the trunk. They have used the smell of dogs. The one time they had an opportunity to have real evidence, DNA evidence, established scientific evidence that has been used in many, many trials, have a real forensic case, they dropped the ball. And in fact, it was contaminated. The FBI expert herself said that that piece of evidence was contaminated, which really bodes well for the defense in this case, because the only forensic evidence that has really been put forth, solid forensic evidence, was contaminated or did not show anything. The state started out this case by putting forth half their case, not putting forth all the evidence. In a typical prosecution, they would probably have called that witness. They chose not to call that witness, not to get that out, and now they gave the defense the opportunity to actually put forth that evidence, and I think it probably damaged the prosecution's case. Does it damage it enough for Casey Anthony to get acquitted? We'll see, but it certainly raises some serious doubt in the case of the state of Florida versus Casey Anthony. This week in the continuing saga of the Casey Anthony trial has been marked by a week of sort of boring forensics and admonishments from the judge and surprise witnesses. The defense has put on a series of witnesses forensically, not really to prove much, but to say that there isn't anything there. The witnesses have come on and said that they didn't find any DNA on anything. They did not find any dirt in any of the shoes, the 22 pairs of shoes, as it be, of Casey Anthony that matched the dirt by the grave site. So they're putting on a case that shows that there really isn't any evidence, and that really seems to be what the case is. The government has not put on the evidence because they don't have it, and the defense is now showing that there really is a lack of forensics. In another sort of turn in the case, the defense has now been given a surprise witness from the prosecution, a person that was supposedly in the jail cell next to Casey Anthony or in the same jail pod that would have had an opportunity to socialize with Casey Anthony. The importance of that particular piece of evidence, if the judge allows it, because this is a 11th hour witness that was just added to the list. But the importance of her testimony is she had a daughter who was drowned in a pool by grandparents, a story strikingly and eerily similar to the story that is now being told by Casey Anthony. I'm assuming that the purpose of that testimony would be to show that Casey Anthony fabricated this story after hearing her cellmate's story. It has yet to be litigated with the judge whether or not that particular witness is going to be allowed to testify in the case. And as far as testimony goes and evidence, the other sort of marked event in the case is that the judge is getting more and more impatient with the attorneys, especially Jose Baez. He has admonished him this week about putting forth evidence that he did not previously disclose to the state, and at this point he has actually excluded some potentially very helpful evidence that the defense has put forward regarding the lack of chloroform. The expert witness that the defense has put on did not provide a report that the judge had required. He did not provide that to the state, and the judge has now said that he cannot use that evidence at this time. However, he's going to have a hearing to make a determination later whether or not that evidence is going to be admissible. For what started out as a very boring week of dry forensic testimony has been marked by some excitement with things going on outside the courtroom, with the potential for new witnesses, surprise witnesses, as well as the exclusion of evidence because of some perceived attorney misconduct. All in all, it's turning out to be a very interesting week for the defense. In the continuing Casey Anthony trial, the defense this week wraps up with what we could call Family Week in the Casey Anthony trial. The last two meaningful witnesses, other than a couple of police witnesses that the defense is following up with, were the mother, Cindy Anthony, and the brother, Lee Anthony. They had previously been called to testify by the prosecution, but they're being called again by the defense. The mother, Cindy Anthony, was called first to the stand, and her testimony was essentially for two essential purposes. One, to testify about chloroform and a computer search regarding chloroform. Previously it has been said that chloroform was found in the car, perhaps, and certainly there was a computer search on the computer for chloroform. The prosecution is inferring or is implying that Casey Anthony had searched chloroform and then used it on Kaylee as somewhat of the mechanism of killing her. This week, under defense questioning, Cindy, the mother of Casey Anthony, testified that in fact she was the one who had searched for chloroform or chlorophyll. It was a little confusing with the testimony. But the meaningful nature of that testimony is now someone other than Casey Anthony did that search, and you can't really tie her in to that particular element of the case, which is a very important element because all along the prosecution has been saying that that is the mechanism of death. It is one more hurdle, one more obstacle that the defense is putting up to show that there's going to be reasonable doubt in the case. They have actually done a fairly effective job so far, and I think that putting Cindy on was a big help in their case. They continued on to call the brother, Lee Anthony. And before I get into that, there was also another important piece of evidence that Cindy was called on to testify about, and that was regarding the pool steps. The defense had shown Cindy with the young girl, Kaylee, going up to the pool. They showed that she actually physically was able to get to the pool. They also elicited testimony that was seemingly new and very damaging to the prosecution, I think, that on the day, sort of the time frame that the prosecution has set for Kaylee's disappearance, that Cindy had come home, and in fact the ladder was unusually attached to the pool, and the gate had been open, and she thought of that was of such note that she had called her husband at work. A very important piece of evidence in the case, another piece that indicates that maybe this was an accidental death, and something that the prosecution is simply unable to contradict, or have not been able to contradict, and in fact did not do that through the cross-examination of Cindy Anthony. The brother Lee was called as the next defense witness. His testimony was regarding his displeasure or his unrest about not being included in the initial knowledge that Casey Anthony was in fact pregnant. It's very difficult to determine what exactly the meaning of the testimony was, but it provides a link, I think, into what it seems to seemingly kind of a bizarre relationship between Casey Anthony and her brother, something that the defense alluded to in the opening of their statement. And I think that's been a theme throughout, and it's been furthered by this testimony with both Cindy and Lee, that there's a very odd family dynamic going on here. And it's not much of a leap to then believe the defense's opening that there was, in fact, a bizarre family dynamic going on. What does that mean as far as Casey Anthony's guilt or innocence? I don't know, but they keep chipping away at the state's case, and they keep putting in all of this doubt as to what really happened, and reasons to have doubt as to the truth or the evidence from anybody. When this case first started, I was very critical of the defense for not doing more with the cross-examinations of their witnesses. I retract from that now, because I think that the prosecution should have got this stuff out in the beginning, and the defense has merely been laying in wait. And I think they furthered their case significantly this week.